In no particular order, I think I want to start with Gene Bottoms, who is with the Southern Region Education Board, High Schools at Work, and many other programs. Gene?
Jim, I'm going to stand up because somewhere between this meeting and the last one, I lost my notepad with all my notes in it.
Okay.
So that means age has caught up with me and senility has set in. And Jim has now changed the question on me. I'm going to ask the question he gave me on the phone the other day. That's true of professors, you know. They never ask you on the exam what's supposed to be there. Why rigorous career pathways? Students need meaningful learning in high school. More students do. Secondly, it will improve readiness for college, advanced training, and the workplace. Over 25 years, as we've tracked students who take rigorous CTE programs that are very robust, 15 to 20% more of those students will meet readiness standards for further study. If they join that with a college-ready core, it'll be 80% plus. We've looked at over 500,000 pieces of data over the last 25 years, and that continues to hold up year in and year out. The problem is too few students have access to robust CTE programs and curriculum. So if you hit the next slide, Jim, I don't know where we hit this button from.
Okay, I was looking for a button changer. But
our work on trying to develop what we call preparation for tomorrow, and we're in the process of probably renaming that, grew out of a commission chaired by Governor Perdue of Georgia that involved policymakers, state superintendents of schools, and business leaders from across the South, and consultants. And growing out of that report, you can find on our website, were three big ideas. One, a balanced approach to accountability where we give as much attention to high school graduation rates as we do for achievement. Secondly, to have an accountability system that recognizes accelerated learning. To allow, yes, we recognize with that AP, recognize that in AP, but every kid who can pass a certification exam, give the same credit as you do for passing an AP exam. And any kid who can meet both a college readiness standard and a career readiness standard, give them an extra point for that system. That was the kind of accountability system. Let's get on the positive side. Let's get beyond minimums and focus on stretching folks out a little bit. Number three, we felt like we have to create optional pathway programs of study in high school that links rigorous, robust CTE courses together with a college-ready core. And our data shows that 80% of the kids can do that. Yes, they even pass algebra too. My friend Jim and I argue about that all the time. My next one, how are you going to do this? Resources. College board, you know what they spend on a course? $800,000 or plus, I'm told. Well, it's taken us about $800,000 to develop 4 robust CTE courses. No state can do that alone. At this stage of the game, we've spent more than $6 million working with these partner states. We have 3 other partner states coming in. Now, the trick is states who want to adopt these curriculum will have to pay more if they're not part of the partnership, because we've got to find ways to continue to sustain the work. Just quickly look at those. Aerospace in Alabama, they field tested their first 2 courses. Arkansas Innovation in Science and Technology is pretty much designed for rural schools, and that's what their economic development people wanted. The course from Ohio, Health Informatics, in South Carolina, Clean Energy Technology, and West Virginia, Energy and Power will all be available, the first 2 courses for adoption this fall, and you have some information back there on the shelf about these. We did agree on, as a group of states, we agreed on how we would select the field. Economic development people, political leaders, and business leaders will be in the process. We agreed on a process for developing the curriculum. Now, keeping 10 states is kind of like together, it's kind of like herding cats. It's not easy. But we have a review process. We continue to work through on that. And so we've built these courses around certain signature features, and let me try to identify these for you. My final and last slide, Jim. Employers have participated in the creation of the project. These curriculums are developed around project problem-based learning, authentic kind of projects you would have to do in the workplace. Industry has helped us shape the definitions of those projects. We insist that a majority of the folks who participate in that stage of the curriculum development be from the private sector. Secondly, students are taught by highly qualified teachers and prepared teachers. To teach each course, there will be 2 weeks of preparation, 8 hours a day, very intense. And we do bring in the part of that effort to collaborate. We bring in the math and science teachers for at least 3 days as part of that connection that we feel has to occur back in the home school. Students will apply state Common Core academic, industry, and 21st century standards to complete assignments. We are embedding the state Common Core academic standards into the curriculum. We're creating projects robust enough that you'll have to draw up on that college-ready core curriculum in order to complete those assignments. Third, apply math calculation analysis to complete projects. Students will have to formulate problem statements, create design options, prepare written work plans, and for many of our STEM projects, we're following the 7 steps of the engineers follow in a problem-solving approach. Other areas will take on the ways of thinking of the other industry groups, like health informatics has a little bit different approach. Use appropriate technology and software to complete the assignments. Complete an end-of-project and end-of-course exam. Each course will be built around 6 projects. At the end of each project, there is an exam. One half the items will be academics, one half will be technical. We want to know if kids can do the math that was embedded in that project, if they can actually read the materials they had to read, if they understand the science concept, and the other half is the technical content. Why do we do that? In America, we are great at projects, but we only judge the project work itself. We never judge the learning around the project. Our European counterparts are much bigger and do a much better job of using projects as a way of learning. We're trying to shift that culture in America. End-of-course exams. There will be an end-of-course exams, low stake, but to assure that students are getting it, it's a way of getting fidelity of implementation. And state-approved industry certification exams. Each of the 4-course sequence will lead to some kind of industry certification exams. And every project has built into it a series of learning experiences where students will investigate the careers around that particular project, the educational pathway options out of it. So we're building this guidance advisement bit into the curriculum itself. Yes, there's dual credit options for the last 2 courses. We envision this being a sequence of courses 9 through 12. Now, high schools have a way of doing things in all kinds of ways, as you well know. But we feel very strongly that in grades 9 and 10, many students need a place to get up out of their seat, go into a lab, do real things that connects their hands and heads and academics and technology together. So we do see that sequence going through, and the master has called time on me. If you want to know more, they're back there on the shelf. You'll find a PowerPoint that will tell you more than you want to know.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Bottoms and Dr. Stone. I'm Patrick Ainsworth. Until December, I was Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Ed, the California Department of Education, the College Career Transition Division. And then I turned the light switch off November 31st and walked out the door. It was great. But I found out that I can't turn the switch on my career. You know, that once you're in this thing, you know, you're in it forever. So Jim was worried that you would be suffering from PCS today, post-cookie syndrome at this hour. So,
It's as bad as mine.
Yeah. The other night, Jay Leno announced that Ding Dongs and Twinkies are coming back, and the crowd went nuts. And they said, "You know, there's one thing I got to say. That new pope, he gets things done." So I'm here today representing the National Association of State Directors of Career Technical Education. Although I had responsibility for secondary education and transformation and preparing people for college, I mostly treasured my title as State Director of Career Technical Education. In the past few years, the association has taken the lead on the development of the Common Career Technical Core Standards, and that's what I've been asked to talk about. Jim made it a point that I shouldn't tell you what they are, because I'm to assume you know that. There are some handouts on the back table, so if you want more information, you can go to our website. I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards, and there's a whole bunch of state directors here at the conference that would be happy to talk to you about them. So let me just say a couple of things about these standards. The so what's. So why are we doing this? First of all, the Common Core state standards in English and math were adopted by about 40 states when we started this. Of course, it's up now 44 or 45 that have adopted it. And they talk about college and career readiness. I happen to be on our state's Common Core implementation team, and I went to this chiefs meeting with all the other states, and there were only 2 people out of the hundreds that were there that were from the career side of the house. But very quickly it became evident that there was a pretty widely known and accepted definition of college readiness, but not necessarily about career readiness. And in a series of dialogues, it became one of probably the top 2 or 3 items on the chief's agenda for the states, trying to figure out what career readiness is. We really believe that career technical education can have a big role in helping with that career readiness side of the equation. And therefore, we redesigned our career clusters work and have now completely revamped it. It's called the Common Career Technical Core. The Common Career Technical Core is, it was a state-led initiative, just like the Common Core state standards were. 42 states signed on, and we had the support of the Chief State Schools Officers, National Governors Association. It wasn't a Me Too effort. It was an and effort, a complementary effort to really help move the ball on the career readiness side of the equation in terms of standards. So why even have standards? The standards define the what's, the what you need to know and be able to do. What is it that we're going to teach? What is going to evolve into instruction? So this group, we brought together leaders from education and industry, hundreds of people, through a process over a year's time, and redesigned the standards. And as you look at them, you'll see that they really do complement the Common Core state standards. There are 16 clusters, 16 industry clusters. Those clusters are designed with a similar nomenclature now as the Common Core state standards. You'll see industry anchor standards, and you'll see pathway standards in 79 different pathways. These were designed to really have a common language that both academic and career teachers would understand. These are designed to define what students should know and be able to do at the end of a program of study or a pathway, whether that was high school or community college. That was our target. We also went ahead and revised the knowledge and skill statements kind of below the pathway level to be more specific, to give a curriculum resource so you would have that ability to take this and use it. 2 minutes, okay. One of the important features of this was the addition of what are called standards of career-ready practice. This is a really important addition to the standards because they're designed to be 12 statements, 12 standards about what students should know and be able to do to be fundamentally career ready at the end of high school or community college. We took all of the various 21st century skills and other designs and distilled those down to some standards that you can translate into curriculum and instruction. So the next steps, states are adopting these. There's been widespread adoption and adaption. They're really a model, and some states are using all 16. Some are using a portion of the clusters. Some states are taking those because they have state law, like California, that requires they adopt their own standards, but using them as the benchmark and looking at those as a way to move the ball in their state. The national directors are committed to moving this ball forward even further into implementation. We're going to be investing more dollars, significant money. We have a group that's being headed by headed by myself, Bill Simons, Rich Cott, Eleni Papadakis from Washington, and that group is going to, has designed the pattern for a task force that will be meeting and looking at how to bring this to all the states, how to support this over the long run. In addition, there's a study going on across the country to find out how much the penetration has occurred as far as these career tech standards and what else needs to be done. So with that, I will be happy to talk later, but I'll pass it on. Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, the next presentation will come from Project Lead the Way.
Good afternoon. I want to say thank you to Bill and Bob and Ron for the invitation to be here today, and also very thankful to be included Project Lead the Way as a model in the 2011 report, Pathways to Prosperity. I'm sure many of you have read that. A great document. It really has brought a lot of attention to what I think is one of the most important pieces of work happening in our country today. And I think the conversations here today and tomorrow are some of the most important conversations happening in our country. And then the next question is, what action do we take as a result of our time here together? I've been in these meetings, and I know sometimes at the end of the day, sometimes early in the day, there's this feeling that we should all get up and go do something. So if we feel that way tomorrow, if we are getting on planes, then that will be a success, I believe, for us. So let me just share a few things about Project Lead the Way. And I know many of you are familiar with Project Lead the Way. We're a national nonprofit. Project Lead the Way, the story, and others here know it as well or better than I. The story is one that I think is one of America's greatest success stories. Project Lead the Way was started by a group of educators who saw a problem and didn't just sit around and think about and talk about the problem. They decided to do something about it. And this was in upstate New York in the mid to late 90s. And they wrote a curriculum and they developed this vision for working in a small network of schools in that region. In the time since then, and since 1997 specifically, Project Lead the Way has grown to be in all 50 states plus Washington, D.C., serving currently this year over 500,000 students with over 5,000 schools. So to me, to have that vision in the early days to turn into this, I think, reminds me a lot of Margaret Mead's quote and what the power of a small group of people who really commit themselves, what they can do. And certainly there's much work for us to do. In terms of lessons learned, and I think about my experience with Project Lead the Way goes back several years. I was a classroom teacher, I was a school administrator, and I was a district administrator prior to joining Project Lead the Way. And my first experience with Project Lead the Way actually came through some of the work that Gene Bottoms was doing at SREB and with High Schools That Work. My school embraced the High Schools That Work model, and it made a tremendous difference in the culture of our school. But I also saw the power of the model as a district administrator when we built a new tech high school around the Project Lead the Way curriculum and what it meant to parents, what it meant to our business and industry partners, and really what it meant to our students ultimately was wonderful. A couple of things that we've learned. One, quality matters. We can't just latch on and tick the STEM education box that sometimes we want to do. Quality matters, outcomes, results matter. Now, I don't think that they matter in the way sometimes some people want us to think they matter, if that makes any sense at all. It can't just be about test scores. At Project Lead the Way, we write biomedical and engineering curriculum for middle schools and high schools. We also test them. We do some standardized testing. However, we are a problem and project-based curriculum. And I've always thought that schools do a good job of pulling the world apart into discrete content areas. Universities do this too. Math over here, science down that hall, English back here. In a Project Lead the Way classroom, what you see are dedicated teachers working with students to put the world back together. And when they do it, it is amazing. And our students are going on, they're patenting their ideas before they leave high school. They're doing tremendous work that will make a real difference in our lives. And I think of biomedical, I think of the engineering solutions that they're engineering. That's going to have a tremendous impact on all of us. Adaptability is important. You know, we can say what we would like to see happen from a national perspective, but ultimately schools make decisions at a very, very local level. And sometimes it's as local as that door being closed and what happens in that classroom. So I think that one of the things that's really powerful about the Project Lead the Way model is that it is adaptable to local context. We're in public schools. We're in comprehensive big high schools. We're in CTE centers. We're in small schools. We're in rural schools, urban schools, suburban schools, public charter schools, private schools. Some of you may have heard Tom Friedman from Francis Tuttle speak in the previous panel back in the Regatta Bar. When I visited Francis Tuttle, one of the things that stood out to me, we also serve a lot of homeschool students who are attracted back for half-day programs because it's so powerful. They are so focused on what they need to do, what they want to do post-high school, that they're coming back to a traditional setting in some ways to do that. Our mission is simple. It's to prepare students for the global economy. We do that, as I mentioned, through curriculum. What's really important about our curriculum, we hire the best curriculum writers in the country, but we ensure that they work with business and industry leaders, with post-secondary partners, both 2-year and 4-year, to make sure that the curriculum is relevant. I'm thinking about an event that also took place in Oklahoma about a year ago where we brought in aerospace engineers from Boeing, from Lockheed Martin, from Northrop Grumman. They worked side by side with our master teachers. They listened to students talk about their experience, and they made adjustments to the curriculum to make sure that it was relevant going forward. So no matter how good what we do today is, in a year, in 5 years, it's going to be what we created back then. So that continuous improvement model is critical for our curriculum, and we do that every day. We think about how we can be better. 2 examples. Our computer integrated manufacturing class, our SIM class. Recently, you may have heard a lot about 3D printing or additive manufacturing. It was critical for our curriculum team to go back and incorporate elements of additive manufacturing and 3D printing in that curriculum to make sure our students get what they need. Another example is computer science and software engineering. If you've looked at what STEM Connector and other folks are putting out about the gap, the skills gap that we're going to have, a lot of that gap exists around computer science, IT, software engineering. Project Lead the Way is writing computer science, software engineering courses today. We're field testing them. We'll be going into pilot stage as well. Additionally, we have an elementary curriculum that is on its way, currently being field tested and will be piloted, so that we have really, and I think earlier I heard the comment, cradle to career. We talk about cradle to career. We talk about diapers to diplomas and beyond. We want to make sure that we're meeting that need. That need is essential. I have next month in April, my kids will all turn a year older. They'll be 10, 7, and 4. And I visited, in my experience, I've been in those classrooms a lot in the elementary level, and I think that so many students understand at an early age in their mind if math is for them, if science is for them, and if engineering and those other things, they develop a problem-solving mentality early if we're lucky. We need to do a better job at those very early ages. But no matter how good the curriculum is, it's only as good as the teacher who teaches it. So our emphasis on professional development is, I think that's one of the most important things we do, and we do that with leading universities all around the country. Additionally, I want to make sure I highlight the role of counselors and administrators. There's a lot of people that make education in the school possible on the education side, on the school side. And so we work very closely to make sure that they understand the opportunities that exist for students as a result of the pathways that we help offer. And finally, what I think is the most important thing about the work that I help facilitate at Project Lead the Way, it's our network of supporters, it's business and industry leaders, it's economic development engines, it's community partners, it's the Kiwanis Club, it's the Chamber of Commerce. All of those groups working together ensure the success of our students. Recognition is critical, and so what we're seeing is more and more of our students are getting college credit for these classes. They're getting preferred admission. Some universities now are asking on their admission application, did you take Project Lead the Way courses in high school? And probably one of the most, I think, positive examples I've seen comes from Kentucky and Toyota's Advanced Manufacturing Technician Program. They are recruiting Project Lead the Way students. They have a workforce need. They have a problem that they're trying to solve, and they're attracting these students because they're not just prepared to be engineers, but they're at that middle-level technician role that is a high-paying job, it's a skilled job, and it's a high-demand job. So lots of examples, and I look forward to answering some of your questions, should time allow. We'll encourage you to grab on your way out. There's a report by Dr. Robert Tye from University of Virginia, one of the things that we've got to do is we have to better understand what's working and what's not working. We've got to stop doing what's not working. We don't have enough resources to support that. Robert Ty is helping us outline a comprehensive research agenda so we can ask better questions about how are we meeting the needs of girls in our classes? How are we serving underrepresented populations? That's our work, and we're excited to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Which one?
Who's next?
You go.
Thank you so much.
Speak well of me to my mother.
I will say speak well of you to your mother.
By the way, as she's coming to the podium, I neglected to say something. I didn't do introductions of folks here because the bios are in your booklet. So, come on, go. I'm just filling in space here.
Oh, sorry, I was not moving quickly enough. Good afternoon. I'll take care of the introductions. My name is Lauren Woodman, and I come from Microsoft. And that sometimes that's like saying, hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you, especially in a room like this. So I want to provide just a little bit of context for the reason that Microsoft is here and frankly has a voice in this, or thinks that we have a voice in this conversation. If you ever make it out to Microsoft, and I encourage you to do so, and if you want to come and visit, stop by and we'll figure out a way to make sure that you come and see. And you come into the hallways where the folks who work on education sit. There's a huge banner in our hallway that says every child deserves an excellent education. And it's an interesting point for Microsoft to have up on its wall, because there was a lot of debate, frankly, internally when we decided whether or not we were going to organize around that principle. Because in reality, we're a private sector company, we're beholden to our shareholders, we write software, and really doesn't matter if Microsoft believes that every child has a right to an excellent education. And that's a very powerful word for us as a company to stand up and say that. I'm proud to say that not only did we agree that that was sort of our organizing principle, but it's been in place for many, many years. And I think it reflects, frankly, the values that our founder brought to the table and a lot of the work that Microsoft has done over the last several years. And I get asked all the time, why does Microsoft spend the amount of time that it does looking at education? And really, it's for a couple of core reasons. You heard from one of my colleagues this morning that Microsoft currently has about 10,000, sometimes as many as 13,000 open jobs for which we cannot find employees because of lack of skilled labor. That's a huge problem for us. It's a huge problem for us if what we're trying to do is to make sure that every child has an excellent education, because it means somewhere there's a disconnect. And it also means that us, frankly, from a corporate perspective, that our long-term competitiveness is somewhat challenged if we can't find people to fill those roles. Within that context, about 3,500 of those jobs are technical software development jobs. And those are great jobs. Those are great jobs for which kids from a variety of pathways can come and come to Microsoft and be successful, and frankly go on to other careers, start their own companies, and be real engines of economic growth. So we come to this in a lot of different directions, and it culminates in a lot of the work that we do on a day-to-day basis. Now, it won't surprise you to know that some of the work that we do is around STEM education. That's clearly something that's within our wheelhouse, and we should be doing that. We also spend a lot of time working with teachers in using technology effectively in the classroom outside of the STEM space. And that's been about a $750 million investment from Microsoft over the last 10 years or so. It's a not insignificant amount of money. And the reason that we did it was largely because of a lot of what you've heard here today. That there really is no differentiation between the academic learning and the technical learning. All of those 10,000 jobs that we have, many of them are marketing, or they're customer service, or they are, I don't know, any number of things, technical writing. Some of them are anthropology. We have map makers. I mean, Microsoft's a big company. We have lots of different things, but all of them require skills that kids need. And when we looked at that space, we realized there's a huge disconnect, and so we started working with teachers. And that's where the majority of our work has been within this particular space over the last 10 years, in trying to help teachers understand how to integrate technology effectively into the work that they do. And there's two things that are interesting about that, or at least interesting to me. One, when we do focus groups with students, they often report that technology gets in the way of their learning. And it's really interesting because we know that technology is one of the ways that we keep kids engaged in schools, and we have to do that. I happen to have two children that are in the class of 2024 and 2026, I think. So if they need a prom, if your grandsons need a prom date, we can talk a couple of years. But we know that when I have a kindergartner, my oldest is a kindergartner, when she, like all kindergartners, she loves schools. 95% of kindergartners love school. That number drops to 35% by the time the kids hit 9th grade. Now it rises a little bit to 45%, give or take some change by the time they hit 12th grade. But I think that's because, frankly, a lot of those kids have dropped out that didn't like school. So we have a problem in terms of how we're engaging our kids. And if technology is supposed to help us and is supposed to help our kids become more employable, but technology is being reported as being in the way, then how do we reconcile that issue? Now, when we dig deeper into that, what we find out is when technology is used badly, students don't like it. When technology is used really well, students don't even notice it because they don't notice it in their day-to-day lives, right? If you ask the student, how did you do your homework last night? They'll say, oh, I typed it on my laptop. They don't think of that as technology and education. That's just the way things get done. So when you integrate technology deeply into traditional curriculum, whether that's language arts or social studies or history or career education or any of those types of things, students don't notice it, and it grows their skills immensely that they're going to need when they get out into the workforce. We all know the statistics. What is it? 70% of jobs in the next 10 years will require IT skills. We're not preparing our kids for that. And we wanted to know how much the gap was. So a couple of years ago, we went back and looked at what the connection was between innovative teaching practice, looking at things like project-based learning and collaboration in the classroom and extending learning beyond the classroom and all of these types of things where you had an integrated approach to a given subject matter, and whether or not kids were learning 21st century skills. Pardon me. And these are all the things that we talk about: collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking, so on and so forth. And we know that those are important because the skills that kids learn today, the practical skills that kids learn today, are irrelevant in about 5 years. So I applaud you enormously for integrating things like 3D printing into computer science classes, into manufacturing classes, because kids need those today when they leave. But if you're teaching those to a 6th grader, by the time that they get to high school or by the time that they go on to work, that world has changed. Think about what you knew 5 years ago when you were working and how much your world has changed since then. Our kids are facing the same challenges. And a child that today is in kindergarten isn't going to hit his or her career prime until 2040. And none of us can say in this room what we know what the workplace is going to look like then. So how do we teach kids the skills that they need in order to be prepared for that world? You know, so much of our current education system is based on the proverb, if you give a man a fish, you can feed him for a day, but if you teach a man to fish, you can feed him for a lifetime. John Seeley Brown's comment to that was my favorite one ever, which is that assumes that there's an endless supply of fish and the mechanisms by which we catch them don't ever change. And so we have to think about how do we equip our kids with the skills that they need in order to get from point A to point B, and that they have this love of lifelong learning, and they can do that. So we did some research. We did it, 7 different countries. We did it over several different years. It's all available online. But largely what we found, pardon me, was that most teachers in the world, more than 50% of them, frankly, weren't using any innovative teaching techniques in their teaching at all. None. They might be emailing their homework assignments to their kids, but in terms of helping their kids develop the skills that they needed in order to be successful in the workplace, it's just not happening. And it wasn't happening anywhere. We weren't surprised, quite frankly, that it wasn't happening in Indonesia or Senegal. We were really surprised to find out that it also wasn't happening in the same percentages in Finland and in Singapore. So we have a huge disconnect in terms of how we prepare teachers. So we need to make sure that when we look at teacher preparation and when we look at teacher professional development, we're really helping teachers make the connection between their teaching practice, integrating technology, and the skills development that kids need so that they can be successful over time. One last thing I'll mention, and then I want to get to your specific questions that you asked us. One of the other things that we looked at was, how do we know whether or not kids have 21st century skills? Like, how do we know if kids have great collaboration skills? And I've worked with lots of teachers over the years that say, oh yeah, no, my kids know how to work in a work group. They know great problem solving skills. These are things that I teach in my classroom. But the definition of that is frankly a somewhat of a surface level Definition. Collaboration is not putting 5 of us together and letting all of us just do our own little job and then coming up with the book report at the end. Collaboration is solving problems together. It's really figuring out how to work together, and how to help teachers understand how to create learning activities that incorporates those is really, really hard. And so when we think about the things that we've seen that have worked really well, letting teachers work collaboratively in order to improve their own teaching, letting teachers be involved in research, look at their own teaching practice. Teaching is a reflective practice. I stand up here and I watch 50 little faces and say, wow, did they get that geometry concept? And I see some kids do and some kids don't. It's inherently reflective. And if I ask myself, well, what about my own teaching practice? I'm going to look at my own teaching practice as a whole, and if I do that as a group, the impact is even more significant. So how do we help teachers understand what great teaching looks like that prepares kids with the necessary skills that they need? And then how do we measure those skills? We've done some research with the University of Melbourne in Australia around measuring 21st century skills and doing so at scale. How do we actually know whether a child has great collaboration skills or great problem solving skills or great communication skills, the things that they'll need in order to be successful? And that work is just now coming to the fore. The research side of it is done, and now the practical side of it is getting is now being rolled out. And it's not just us, there's a number of industry players that are involved in that. So as we think about the things that are necessary and the things that I would hope that we walk away from are a couple of things. One, many of our teachers were trained years ago, but they're crucial linchpins in keeping kids engaged and making sure that they get the skills that they need, not just for the next 5 years, but the next 10, 20, 15, all those years advance in their career, since apparently I can't count by 5s in order today. Sorry about that. All of those years, my kindergartner is now rolling over in her classroom thinking, Mom, don't you know how to count by 5s? But as they prepare for their careers over time, 2, how do we help school leaders foster a culture within the school where teachers are willing to incorporate skills and not just think about subject matter expertise? And 3, how do we help communities of practice, teachers that are doing things that work, bring those to the forefront and share those and recognize when that work happens, so that ultimately our students, when they do get ready to leave school, when they do graduate for high school, are ready for either career or college moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to start using some of my time with you. So I'm going to pose a question. You're going to raise your hand when I've completed the question. Do not raise your hand until I've completed the question. All right. So, have any of you been married? And if you've been married more than multiple times, that counts as 1.
Okay.
No, numbers don't matter. Have you ever been in a relationship that resembles or closely resembles marriage? Have you ever contemplated being in a relationship that is marriage, or any facsimile thereof? Raise your hand if you have entered into any kind of relationship that you would call a marriage, under any other terms. Okay, this is the vast majority. Okay, so this is a fairly random question in context of what we're talking about. However, for me, it's not random. So I'm going to put this way. My driving question for my little talk, is something I've been thinking about for 30 years, over 30 years. One is how to maintain my own marriage and keep it going, and how to do a good curriculum. So because I'm at a point in my life where I can't have separate constructs for such things, I've put the two together. All right, so for the purposes of this little conversation, I'm going to connect those two things. But before I do that, I want you to think in your head of one aspect of maintaining a marriage that you think works, just one. Get in your head one thing that works in keeping a marriage going. When I say go, turn to anybody willing to listen to you, share that one thing, and then look right back at me, but don't take long because Jim's got a timer on me. So when I say go, share that one thing now. Go. Anybody nearby? Nod your head yes.
Say yes. Yes. That's a great one, actually.
Time's up. Time's up. Time's up. Time's up. I know. Come on now. Come on. Don't make me work hard. Don't make me work any harder than my marriage calls for. So I'm going to share with you 7 things that make my marriage work. I make no claim that they'll work for you, but they do seem to work as principles for curriculum. But the two are connected in my head. All right. So the first one is balanced communication. All right. If you have you may have something like this. So what that means is get beyond yes, dear, but get to a point
where the students are doing as much communication or more than the teachers, all right? And that there's listening involved on all sides. When I was growing up, the teachers had a lot to say and the students had very little to say. And I've gone around a lot, and I see some change, but I don't think it's nearly the level of change that we would be dreaming. So balance the communication is a principle that I would look for. Second one, have a common purpose, all right? Most of the purpose of education is what adults say the purpose of education, but we have many constituencies. Throughout the day, we've been hearing who's are the people that we should have common purpose with. Well, we have college and career, so we have employers, but I would throw in the students, all right? This is a very adult, tomorrow we're gonna have students, but you're gonna hear from them, but have common purpose among all the parties. So get to a point of common purpose, all right? Next, get out of the house. All right, now I don't know if this matters in your world, in your marriage, but in my world, if we don't get out of the house, things don't work so well. In the context of a curriculum, what this means at NAF is the following. A classroom is a very isolated place. It's a place where many teachers go to hide from the rest of the world. All right? They often resent anybody who comes in and pokes their nose in there, particularly if they have the capacity of evaluating or judging. A classroom cannot be isolated from the rest of the world. It has to be part of the rest of the world. At NAF, in our model, one part of that world is the workplace. So all students have to do work-based learning. Our curriculum, as well as our partners at Leadway, we deliberately put in lessons and activities that require students to engage professionals as part of their work. Now, NAF also has advisory boards as part of its model, so they're actual local professionals, but we built the curriculum to be intertwined with the world outside the classroom. Then there's the world inside the school that needs to be integrated. To this very day, I cannot, maybe you can think of, what is the profession other than high school teacher that organizes a day the way a high school does? I'm waiting. All right. I can't think of a single one. All right. And I regret to even think of conditions that even closely resemble it because they're pretty bad. When most students go to school, there is absolutely no coherence to the entire day. They go from a period where they might be reading Dickens, then somebody's going to talk to them about cell division, then somebody's going to talk to them about the czar, then somebody's going to talk, whatever. Try to get integrated curriculum. Things that hold together. And a career theme is an excellent vehicle for this. All right. You heard a lot about the whole notion of, well, career education doesn't enjoy the same status as many other college prep, for example. I would argue that career education, and I wouldn't just argue it, NAF will argue it, that it is the backbone that links many different subject areas. I don't know what everybody in the room does, but it's my supposition that all of you draw upon multiple disciplines to do your jobs. All right? You don't just say, I'm a scientist, I just do science. I don't read. I don't write. I don't communicate. I don't have to know any history. It doesn't work like that, and most people in most businesses have to do that. Next, focus on the long term. Okay? Focus on the long term. What that means is think of programs of study, not just courses. What is the entire experience supposed to be for the student? When NAF implements an academy, it expects the career curriculum to start in 9th grade, be in 10th grade, be in 11th grade, and be in 12th grade. It doesn't say you take a career course and then you're in an academy. All right? It says it's a program of study. It's also linked to the work-based learning. It's not just an internship. It's job shadowing. It's interviewing professionals. It's doing a lot of things. When I say long-term, assume that most students won't become what we train them to become. All right? Or even if they start out that way, well, let me pose a question. How many of you have changed careers or careers once? More than once. Look around. All right? That's going to happen to these kids. So whatever you're teaching them, it better be useful beyond the very specific set of skills you're providing in the classroom. Next, stay active. All right? A marriage that's boring is one that's not very active. For us, that's project-based learning. All right? This means the students start doing things, all right, not just listening to teachers tell them things or assigning them reading things to do. They do things. They get involved with each other, not just the teacher. They get busy. In the NAF curriculum, when we design it, we limit a lecture to 15 minutes tops. That's the longest we tell a teacher you may talk in a sustained basis. Why? Because students won't listen to you beyond that. You'd be lucky to get the 15, all right? So, stay active. Next, this is really important if you really want a long marriage. Reinvention, all right? The person you're in love with 25, 30 years ago is not the person you're living with now. At least I'm not. Maybe you are, but I'm not. And she's not, all right? So always make new things, all right? Keep it fresh. Keep it fresh and keep it alive. The last one I'll do, I won't even use all the rest for the questions. Celebrate and take stock. All right, celebrate and take stock. Cheer on your students. Don't just demand from them. We expect every student to share and be celebrated for what they're doing when they do it well. So every course ends with a presentation, not just for their classmates, for professionals, for the people to whom who will be like the people they will someday work for. And then praise them. Get excited about their world, not just your expectation for their world, all right? And then assessment, all right? This is the take stock. What did we learn and how did we learn it? So in the last year, not only I'll just parenthetically explain, NAF has 30 of its own courses in addition to what we also include with Project Lead the Way, all right? We now have an assessment system, a student certification assessment system. It's designed with all the principles I just gave you in mind. So it's not just a test, it's also a performance assessment of the projects. It's not one course, they have to do at least 4. It's not just the classroom. They have to have a workplace learning experience, and the employer evaluates them. Upon completion of all of that, all right, then we say, this is a real NAF student. All right? So you take stock, you honor it, and you identify what the student has learned. All right? And then I'll just take a little bit of the last time about scaling up. All right? Today, the NAF network has about 62,000 students in it in 37 states. All right? Scaling up comes with a good idea, well executed. All right? If you have good ideas, and everybody up here has done great, great work. All right, you heard the numbers on Lead the Way. We know how SREB is done. We know how big Microsoft is, and all the other. We know this. So scaling up is going to happen when you've got something really good that people want to do. But the people should also include the students, not just what the adults want. So I'll stop right there. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time. Good luck in your marriages. Oh yeah, you can have the list. It's all on one piece of paper, by the way.
I'll email it to you. Thought it was good advice.
All right.
Good.
Thank you to the panel, and thank you especially to Andy. Had I but had that curriculum as a much younger man, I wouldn't be on my 4th marriage. Let's move in. Everybody needs a hobby. I could have collected stamps, a lot less expensive. What I'd like to do now, instead of having the panel talk amongst themselves, I want you to talk to the panel. So raise your hand. What's your question? What's your issue? What do you think about these questions I've asked the panel? You've heard them. You know what they're doing. If you don't, the brochures are out there. Questions from you. Yes, sir.
Well, you mentioned horizontally integrate.
Yes.
At the local level, I have my experience, it's very difficult because the academic folks, I'm a CTE person, the academic folks own the ball, they own the bat, they own the playing field. And trying to get them to play, you have to find somebody who is willing to do that. Not if there's no one saying that they have to play with them.
Yeah.
So that's a difficulty, and how can we do that in terms of moving this curriculum agenda forward?
Okay. Let me turn to the panel. I have a thought, but panel, Gene, at NAF, at Project Lead the Way?
I would just comment briefly. To accomplish what this conference envisioned, particularly in comprehensive high schools and even in shared time technology centers, you have to have school leadership who will create a scheduling structure, who create an organizational structure, and who recognizes and endorse this cross-curriculum planning together. And that means a joint kind of training and materials.
All right. Yeah, I would add to that list. We at NAF advocate cohorting of students in small learning communities. So a very standard feature of our best model, when it's done well, is that the teachers share their time together. They share the same students together. That gives them the shared planning time. I would also say that shared planning time and making good use of it requires a lot of professional development. Teachers don't naturally get trained and come about this. Some may have a gift for it, but the reality is to get to quality shared planning takes some support, all right? And it doesn't just happen by throwing a bunch of teachers together. And so there are some very identifiable techniques associated with that. And so keeping them together under those circumstances, I would add.
The first thing I thought of, if I understand your question, the first thing that came to mind was exactly what Gene said, and that's leadership. And I think about how I went into school leadership was because I decided I could say no just as well as some of the folks that were saying no to me. And I think we need to get to a point where we're saying, okay, we have a problem, what if, and how could we? And as educators, everybody in the room has a voice. Everybody in this room has tremendous influence. And to just accept the reasons why things won't work, I think that's a lot of how we got to where we are today. So it doesn't mean that every idea gets pulled up to an actionable step, but we have to vet ideas. We have to think together, and it can't just be the person who's been assigned the role of leader. Everybody in this room is a leader or has the potential to be a leader. So we have to use our influence to make those things happen. If you need to have that horizontal, that team time or that common planning or that communication across various disciplines, then somehow you've got to express that and then start to work a solution. Look, I've got a way where I think this will work. And maybe that will start a conversation that gets the result that you need.
I would only add, some of you may know our center's done a lot of work on this notion of horizontal integration, and there's a publication that we have called Capitalizing on Context. And rather than tell you what's in it, it's a PDF download, and I can give you the reference. Yes, all the way in the back.
Yes, my question is about one of the challenges that we face in this new system is the question of the school calendar. It's 180-day New York State. And I wonder if you have given some thought whether it's necessary, not necessarily sufficient, but necessary to address the issue of time in the school calendar.
Well, we do need to have those urban kids out in mid-May so they can plant crops. There's no question about that. Is this something, Naf, I'll take a crack at that.
There are two parts to my response to that. One has to do with the use of time as it's already available. So we would say that right now time is the most prescribed element in a school, right? So you remember I was talking about the way a day looks. Well, you all know how that looks. So there's too much prescription, I believe, regulatory-wise, on how time is used, and we would advocate moving more towards competency orientations, shared effort, shared work. So if you had more flexibility within the 180 days time, you would be able probably to come up with systems that are more effective than the one you have now, which we view as dissipating a lot of opportunity. But that said, the work-based learning component is also an extra time. But being able to move to another location, to get off campus, in some cases to actually have work experiences that are supervised in the form of internships, would be an extension of time that we would certainly advocate if you can make that available. But then I would also say recommend getting credit for that. Having systems that enable students to, in a sense, earn something for that extra effort. And differentiate that from a summer job, by the way, just to make that really clear. NAF has a gold standard for internships, and our internship assessment is not a summer job. I mean, there's a certain characteristic of the workplace you have to demonstrate. So that's one possible way of responding.
I would just reinforce one of Andrew's points. Just to increase the number of days or number of hours without changing what is occurring in the classroom will get you greater boredom. One innovative approach would be to begin to plan summer experiences built on a different framework of learning and let people see what actually happens when you engage kids differently. You almost, we're so locked in to a proven approach, to a way of instruction right now, that folks have to see and experience the motivational students when you dramatically change the nature of learning. And one point was made, no more than 15 minutes an hour can be devoted to direct teacher instruction in that summer experience.
We have, yes, sir. You. Yes.
Hi, Gideon Sanders, Director of Partnerships at McKinley Technology High School in DC. And I direct this more to what David said prior to the last question, and also to Ms. Woodman. At McKinley, we're actually doing some work with Project Lead the Way in our engineering curriculum, but also with Microsoft. And we've kind of merged the two, in that Microsoft is launching the new Windows 8, so they've developed a program to allow our students to work through biotechnology and our IT and professional athletes to create health and wellness apps for the Windows Live 8 store. So it's a fantastic opportunity for our students to be able to do things like this. Now, in the 2.5 years that I've been doing this job, I've found that companies become very proprietary. They don't want to share it. And because of that, we're not allowing the great ideas that exist and formats that exist to be replicated. We get so hung up on don't steal my content or don't use my content. And that begs the question, what is the real purpose? What is the real bottom line that we're talking about? Is it the profit of the company? Because I don't think Microsoft's going to get a lot of profit out of one app developed by a bunch of high school students. It could. But more, that the bottom line is the student. We want the students to get the best opportunities possible. How can we figure out a way to share the fantastic work that Athlotech through Microsoft has developed to work with our students and take that to a different level? It doesn't have to be athletes, it can be astronauts, it can be, whatever it is. But how can we replicate that across companies and share it amongst each other without getting bent out of shape?
Wow, somebody thought Microsoft was bent out of shape? That's a shocker. So let me address this in a couple of different ways. And one, I'm happy to, it sounds like there's a specific issue here that I'm happy to take offline. I'll say a couple of things, though, about the way that we see these types of partnerships happening and the way that we see software development happening, frankly, in the future. When all of us started using computers 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, the notion of an app was something that we bought at Best Buy or Circuit City, and it came on a CD, and we installed it, and big companies did those things, and sometimes startup companies did those things. But the notion of apps has dramatically changed the way that we think about software development these days. And we literally have kids all over the world. I mean, as young as 4th, 5th, 6th grade that are writing apps that are up on the Microsoft Store. And anyone can write an application and stick it up in the Windows Store and download it. And that is their money. That's their resources, their things. It's not a, we don't do what some of our other colleagues in the industry do. We don't take the same percentages and whatnot, because we really do believe that rich ecosystem around the Windows platform is really crucial. There are more than 700,000 Microsoft certified software development partners around the world. That is a huge number. It's trillions and trillions of dollars, none of which comes to Microsoft. I mean, to put it in somewhat of a context, for every dollar that Microsoft earns, there's somewhere between $7 and $11 that our partners and others earn that has nothing to do with our corporate revenues. So we want to make sure that when those apps get uploaded, and the new flexibility that not only our platform, but frankly other platforms, and the way that we're approaching software development as an industry these days, I think creates more opportunities for kids, for small companies, and so on and so forth to develop. I'm happy to talk about exactly what's going on at McKinley.
Actually, I think you misunderstood. I'm actually
Possibly.
praising Microsoft because they've developed such a fantastic program with our schools. My question isn't so much about the app development and the content. How can we take this incredible opportunity that Microsoft has created and replicate it? How can we get it to everybody else? Why not take not an Apotech, but Astronautotech, I don't know,
Sure.
whatever, and do an engineering similar deal?
Absolutely, and I mean, and I apologize for not understanding. And I'm glad it's been a successful process. I think that's very much what we look at trying to do. And part of the challenge is not having sufficient development expertise, frankly, in the schools. I mean, a lot of the computer science teachers that we talk with are really looking at technologies that are quite old and aren't teaching the skills that our kids need today. If you look at some of the programs that we have, whether it's through IT Academy or our partnerships with universities and high schools around the world, we actually give all this code away and all these dev tools away and make these resources available at either reduced prices or sometimes in free prices so that students can have these tools everywhere. We have a program called DreamSpark, for example, where every one of Microsoft's development tools are free to students anywhere. So your kids want to develop code and write applications, we actually think they should do that. I was actually just at an event in Paris where the Carlos Slim Foundation in Mexico is driving this notion in Mexican schools that every child ought to learn how to code, regardless of what their area of expertise is and regardless of how old they are. Now that may not be right for everyone, but the idea is really intriguing. And so when we look at things like Kodu, which is a programming language that we have for really small children that's it's driven by your very young children, first, second, third grade, can write games. Getting kids involved in that is really interesting. And it's really interesting, I think, from a generic national competitiveness view. We've looked at some career choice research. And kids don't make their career choices until they get older into middle school and high school, but they start ruling out careers early on. And once they've ruled it out, it's almost impossible to get a child to go back and reconsider that career. So if we lose a kid at third grade or fourth grade because they don't think they're good at math, they're never going to be an electrical engineer. We're never going to get them back into computer science. So I think that the more that we can do, and frankly, you guys need to push us, not just Microsoft, but push all of the industry to say, what more can you do to help us prepare our kids? Because we need to make sure that we have a good partnership with education so that we're providing what educators need, what schools need, and what policymakers need in order to make sure that these kids are effective. Sorry, that was a really...
I want to first apologize to the panel and thank the panel. My apology is we're out of time, number one. Number two, every panel member, my colleagues here, could have taken the entire hour just to talk about what they're doing. In fact, more than that. That's the apology. But I would like to thank them for working under an extreme duress that was imposed on me that I shared with you. It does all flow downhill. So thank you to the panel.